Welcome, travelers. Tonight, we won't just visit Olympus, nor simply name its gods. We'll settle in, as the ancient Greeks once did, on quiet winter nights, and let a story unfold, slowly, gently. At the dawn of time, when primordial chaos stirred, and darkness reigned supreme, the very fabric of existence began to take shape. Before the gods of Olympus, before even the mighty Titans, there was only the unnamed vastness. And then, from the void, emerged the primordials. Gaia, the Earth Mother, abundant and fertile, who gave shape and substance to all. Uranus, the starry sky, who wrapped her in a constant embrace. And Erebus, the abyssal darkness, alongside his sister Nyx, the night, who wove the veil of ignorance. They were not gods with faces or thrones, but raw elemental forces that manifested in every sunrise and every shadow that stretched across the land. To the first humans, who crawled humbly upon Gaia's skin, the world was a place of unspeakable wonder and terror. The lightning that split the skies, the tremors that shook the ground, the sun that gave life, and the winter that took it, all of it was the breath of immeasurable beings, whose wills lay far beyond mortal comprehension. Our ancestors, with no names yet, for most of these forces, could still feel them, in the wind howling through caves, in the warmth of the fire that protected them. It was a time of pure awe and visceral fear, where the sacred and the profane had not yet been separated. Every bush, every stream, every stone might hold a numen, a spirit that had to be recognized and, if possible, appeased. But as always, order seeks to emerge. From Gaia and Uranus were born the Titans, a generation of colossal and powerful beings. Cronus, the youngest among them, guided by a shadowy cunning, led a rebellion to dethrone his father Uranus. It was an act of cosmic violence, a tearing of the umbilical cord between sky and earth, and from the blood of Uranus, spilled upon Gaia, rose the Erinyes, the Furies, with their serpent whips, a dark reminder that vengeance and retribution would echo throughout the newborn universe. Cronus, fearing the same prophecy that doomed his father, began devouring his own children. The moment they were born, imagine the terror. Each divine newborn met the open, ravenous mouth of their monstrous father. But Rhea, desperate mother and silent rebel, with Gaia's help, managed to save the youngest, little Zeus. Hidden away, he was fed with the milk of a magical goat, surrounded by the deafening clang of the Curetes, warriors who beat their shields to muffle his cries. This secret, kept in the depths of a cave in Crete, spun the thread of hope for a new age. When Zeus came into his fullness, the world trembled. He returned, not as an invader, but as a destined redeemer. With a magical potion, he tricked Cronus, who vomited up his children, one by one. It was a chaotic rebirth, a second chance, for the divine family. And so, freed from the darkness of their father's belly, the young gods, the Olympians, prepared for what would become the greatest war the cosmos had ever witnessed, the Titanomachy. This is a tale of the cosmos, of gods. And for 10 long years, the heavens and the earth became the stage for a cataclysmic battle that shook the very foundations of creation. On one side stood the Titans, led by Cronus, armed with brute, ancient force, supported by mighty figures like Atlas, who would later be condemned to bear the weight of the sky. On the other side, the young Olympians, led by Zeus and his thundering power, who had freed their uncles, the Hecatoncheires, beings with 100 arms and 50 heads, and the one-eyed Cyclopes, who, in gratitude, forged Zeus's thunderbolts, Poseidon's trident, and Hades' helmet of invisibility. This war was not merely a clash of powers. It was a conflict of ideologies, the old order of chaos and tyranny, against the new promise of justice and law. Lightning tore through the dark skies. Mountains were hurled like stones. The echoes of divine collisions rumbled across creation. And though humanity was not yet conscious of its destiny, it was being forged. In every thunderclap, in every roar of battle. Eventually, with the strength of his allies and his own unrelenting will, Zeus led the Olympians to victory. The Titans were cast down into Tartarus, the darkest, most feared depth of the underworld, sealed behind bronze gates and guarded by the Hecatoncheires, a timeless warning of what happens when the old order refuses to yield. But the Olympian victory did not bring immediate peace. Instead, it established a new order. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, the three brothers, drew lots to divide the realms of the universe. Zeus, with his eagle gaze, claimed the skies and supreme authority. Poseidon, with his turbulent heart, took command of the seas. And Hades and Blanks Ford, the silent and solemn, received the deep earth, the domain of the dead. This divine division shaped the universe as the Greeks came to know it. A trifold cosmos, where each layer had its sovereign and its own immutable laws. Humans, dwelling between these realms, found themselves at the mercy of powerful beings who, while not always benevolent, were at least consistent in their passions. This marked the beginning of the age of the Olympians, the golden age of myth, whose echoes still reach us. The cosmos was now ordered, Zeus ruling the skies, Poseidon the seas, and Hades the depths. But the universe was not made of divisions alone. It was also woven from the subtle threads of experience. And for mortals, few experiences were as defining as the passage from day to night, from clarity to mystery. Enter two deities who embodied those extremes. Twin siblings, born under extraordinary circumstances, who would come to shape the human soul and mind. Apollo and Artemis. Their story begins on Delos, a wandering island, said to have floated aimlessly through the Aegean. Their mother, Leto, pregnant by Zeus, was relentlessly pursued by the wrath of Hera, who had decreed that no solid land was to shelter her for childbirth. But Delos, rootless and drifting, was not bound by Hera's command, and it was there, beneath an uncertain sky, that Leto gave birth. First came Artemis, the huntress, born with innate strength and a wild spirit. It is said that she, freshly born, helped her mother deliver her brother. From that very moment, she became the goddess of childbirth, protector of the young, a divine irony, as she would remain an eternal virgin, shunning marriage and motherhood. She embodied the untamed frontier, the untouched wilderness, the mystery of night, and the silent grace of the hunt. Her skill with the bow was legendary. Her arrows swift and precise, capable of sudden death, for reckless hunters or fierce protection. For wild animals and young maidens, she was Lady of the Wild, guardian of forests and mountains. Her presence was felt in the rustle of leaves, in the silver glow of the moon, which was often linked to her. Soon after, Apollo was born, radiant, golden, and shining with light. With him came music, poetry, prophecy, and healing, a set of gifts so vast that he became one of the most revered gods. If Artemis was the stealthy darkness of the forest, Apollo was the sunlight that pierced through the trees. If she personified instinct, he embodied reason, order, and harmony, expressed through the melody of his lyre and the riddles of his oracle. His gift for music, a present from Hermes, was so sublime it could calm storms, heal the sick, and inspire the greatest poets. He was master of musicae, the sacred unity of art and science. His influence extended to colonization, law, and ritual purification. Together, they were more than opposites. They were mirrors, each reflecting a fundamental part of human nature. To mortals, Artemis was a force to be respected. Those who dared violate the sanctity of nature, hunt without mercy, or scorn her purity, would face her swift, relentless wrath. Stories like that of Actaeon, who, upon seeing her bathe, was turned into a stag and torn apart by his own hounds, served as grim warnings about the inviolability of her domain. She was the guardian of transitions, of young girls becoming women, of the border between human settlement and untamed wild. Her temples were not found in great cities, but in hidden clearings or on remote mountain peaks, where human presence was minimal and the wilderness reigned. Apollo, by contrast, was the god of civilization. His most famous sanctuary, Delphi, was the navel of the world, where the Pythia, his high priestess, spoke prophecies in ecstatic trance. Pilgrims from across the Greek world, kings, generals, and common folk, came seeking answers to life's most pressing questions. His oracles, often cryptic, forced mortals to ponder, to interpret, to take responsibility for their choices. Apollo did not offer easy truths. He illuminated the path and demanded the mind search for meaning. He was the light that revealed, but also the light that blinded, the god of reason, who could also bring madness when misunderstood. Apollo's music, gentle and structured, was the antidote to chaos. He was the leader of the muses, goddesses of inspiration, and his musical contests were legendary. Yet losing to Apollo could be fatal, as in the story of Marsyas, a satyr who challenged him to a flute contest and was flayed alive for his arrogance. A chilling tale about the dangers of artistic pride and hubris. Apollo, too, was the god of plague, capable of sending pestilence with his arrows just as easily as he could heal. He, like many gods, was a perfect duality, showing that the same power that brings light can also bring destruction. The art and rituals dedicated to Apollo and Artemis reflected both reverence and fear. Apollo was often portrayed as a youthful, beardless figure, lyre or bow in hand, serene in expression, the embodiment of Kalokagathia, the Greek ideal of physical beauty and moral virtue. His games, like the Pythian Games, celebrated not only athleticism, but also music and poetry, elevating the human spirit. Artemis, on the other hand, was depicted in motion, her flowing tunic, her bow drawn, accompanied by hunting dogs. She was wild agility, untouchable freedom, the embodiment of nature, at its purest and most unforgiving. For young Athenian girls, the rites of Brauron, where they dressed as bears to honor her, marked the transition from childhood to womanhood, a reminder that growing up meant embracing one's primal, untamed nature. Apollo and Artemis, at their core, taught the Greeks the importance of balance. Apollo's clarity of reason was inseparable from Artemis's mystery and instinct. One could not exist without the other. Society, with its laws and its art, needed the controlled wildness of the hunt to define itself. Apollo's poetic inspiration often came from the Muses, nymphs who dwelled in Artemis's untamed domain. They symbolized the eternal tension between order and chaos, civilization and wilderness, mind and body. And mortals, as they observed and worshipped these divine twins, began to understand the paradoxes within their own nature. This dance of light and shadow, reason and instinct, continues to echo in the deepest corners of the human soul. The Greeks, in their ancient wisdom, understood that we are not made of one force or the other, but of the union of opposites, seamlessly woven into one being. Harmony was found, not by choosing sides, but by accepting and integrating both. That is the lesson. Apollo, with his solar brilliance, and Artemis, with her silver moonlight, have whispered to us for millennia. They did not demand blind devotion. They asked only for understanding, to know their place in the vast scheme of things, and ours in relation to them. And now, to our fellow explorers of myth. If you had to choose between Apollo's light of reason or Artemis's primal intuition to guide you through a crucial moment, which would you choose and why? Your perspective matters. The cosmic tapestry, woven with Apollo's light and Artemis's shadow, was vast and complex. But for mortals, what shaped their daily lives most were the passions and realms of the gods who walked closest to them, those who directly interfered in human affairs. And at the heart of this whirlwind of divine emotion sat the king of Olympus himself, Zeus, the thunderer, whose authority was unquestioned, but whose desires were an endless source of drama, glory, and ruin. Imagine a mortal, a humble shepherd, on the slopes of Arcadia, watching the clouds roll in. He knew the thunder was Zeus's voice, the lightning his hand. But he also knew that the life of a hero, or the downfall of a family, could begin with a single glance from Zeus to a beautiful mortal woman. The legends of Danae, visited by Zeus as a golden shower, or Leda, seduced in the form of a swan, were not just tales of passion. They were stories of overwhelming divine power, bursting into human lives, giving birth to demigods of extraordinary strength and fate, but also leaving behind trails of jealousy and sorrow. Each divine encounter was a new, unpredictable thread in the tapestry of mortal destiny. And wherever Zeus went, the shadow of Hera, his majestic and jealous wife, was never far behind. Hera, queen of the gods, was the sacred protector of marriage and family, a bitter irony given her husband's endless betrayals. Her fury was not a flash of lightning, but a lingering storm, cold and calculated, capable of haunting generations. Think of Heracles, the greatest of Greek heroes, whose entire life was marked by Hera's wrath, from the snakes in his cradle to the 12 labors that nearly broke him. Zeus's fleeting desires birthed Hera's unyielding jealousy, a divine force of destruction, but also a solemn reminder of the sanctity of marital bonds, even among immortals. To the Greeks, Hera's rage was a warning. When disorder ruled in the divine household, it would surely echo into the mortal one. But not all divine passion was so entangled. There was raw, uncontrollable passion, the kind that spilled blood on the battlefield. This was Ares, the god of war, son of Zeus and Hera. Ares embodied violence in its purest form, the fury of the clash, the roar of bloodlust. He cared not for justice, only for the glory of battle, the chaos, the fear, the roar. His companions were his sons, Phobos, fear, and Deimos, terror, and the goddess Eris, discord, who followed him like a shadowy procession into every war. Ares's presence could shift the tide of battle, filling warriors with blind courage or overwhelming panic. Those who followed him were often consumed by a thirst for violence that led to their own destruction. Despite his power, Ares was disliked by gods and mortals alike. Even Zeus loathed him, calling him the most hateful of all gods. In the Iliad, he was not strategic like Athena, who represented just and disciplined war. Ares was frenzy, raw instinct, unreasoning rage. And, ironically, despite his brutality, Ares often lost. In the Trojan War, he was wounded by Diomedes, a mortal. With the help of Athena, he fled to Olympus, howling in pain to Zeus. Once he was even trapped in a jar by 2 mortal sons of Poseidon, held prisoner for months. A humiliation for the god of war. His unpopularity and repeated failures taught the Greeks a lesson. Brute force without wisdom is often ineffective, even ridiculous. In contrast to Ares's rage, or perhaps as his secret complement, stood Aphrodite, goddess of beauty, love, and desire. Born from sea foam, she was the embodiment of irresistible attraction, of passions that could topple kings and spark wars. Her power was not felt in bloodshed, but in the hearts of men and women, in courtly intrigue, in homes and in beds. The love she inspired could be a blessing, uniting souls, creating life, or a curse, leading to obsession, betrayal, and ruin. Think of Helen of Troy. Her beauty, blessed by Aphrodite, launched a decade-long war and brought down a civilization. Aphrodite wielded no thunderbolts. Her weapon was desire, a force so strong it could bend the will of mortals and gods alike. Her manipulation was subtle, but vast in its reach. Remember the story of Eros and Psyche. Psyche was a mortal of such extraordinary beauty that people began to worship her as if she were Aphrodite herself. Jealous, Aphrodite commanded her son, Eros, to make Psyche fall in love with the most hideous creature on earth. But when Eros saw her, he accidentally wounded himself with his own arrow and fell deeply in love. Aphrodite's rage was merciless. She subjected Psyche to impossible and dangerous tasks, hoping the mortal girl would perish for her offense. This tale revealed not only Aphrodite's jealousy, but her use of love and suffering as tools of control and vengeance. And when desire turned against her, she remained powerful still. Take the tale of Aphrodite and Anchises. Zeus, weary of Aphrodite, always manipulating others through love, decided to humble her by making her fall for a mortal man. Anchises, a handsome Trojan prince and shepherd, became the target. Aphrodite, disguised as a Phrygian princess, seduced him. From their union came Aeneas, future hero of Troy and forefather of the Romans. Aphrodite warned Anchises never to reveal he had lain with a goddess, lest Zeus strike him down. But Anchises, in drunken pride, boasted of the affair. Zeus struck him with lightning, crippling or paralyzing him. Even when shamed, Aphrodite's legacy endured. Her union had birthed a glorious bloodline. Her power, even in vulnerability, was undeniable. These gods, with their intense passions and vast domains, were mirrors of the human condition. Zeus with his authority and his flaws, Hera with her wounded dignity and relentless vengeance, Ares with his thirst for conflict and humiliations, and Aphrodite with her seductive power and capacity to manipulate desire, even when she herself was ensnared by it. They showed the Greeks that the deepest human emotions, love, jealousy, rage, longing, were not mere mortal feelings, but cosmic forces that moved the universe. Human life was a stage where these divine passions played out, often with tragic consequences, but always with a greater purpose: to teach the price of ambition, the nature of power, and the inevitability of fate. While the divine passions of Zeus, Hera, Ares, and Aphrodite stirred Olympus and the mortal world, there were other gods whose power did not lie in thunder or seduction, but in the sharpness of the mind, the skill of the hand, and the brilliance of communication. They were the architects of thought, masters of invention, and heralds of connection, shaping civilization in quieter but equally profound ways. At the heart of divine intelligence stood Athena, goddess of wisdom, war strategy, and the manual arts. Her very origin was a tale of intellect and unmatched power. Zeus had swallowed Metis, the goddess of prudence, fearing a prophecy that she would bear a child more powerful than he. Zeus believed he had outwitted fate, but inside him, Metis's wisdom grew and grew until it caused an unbearable headache. Then Hephaestus, the divine smith, split Zeus's skull with a strike of his axe, and from it sprang Athena. She was no fragile child, but a fully grown goddess, armed with spear and shield, emitting a war cry that echoed through Olympus. She was not born. She was manifested, an idea made flesh, the embodiment of reason and logic, emerging directly from the mind of Zeus. To mortals, Athena was the force behind every clever military maneuver, every ingenious invention, every finely crafted vase or woven cloth. She was not the blind fury of Ares. She was the cool strategist who won battles before the first sword was drawn. Her favorite city Athens bore her name, and the Parthenon, her most glorious temple, was a testament to her influence on art, architecture, and the very concept of democracy. But Athena's wisdom was not only theoretical, it took form in creation. And here enters Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith, god of fire and forge. His origin was marked by imperfection, a trait that set him apart. In some myths, Hephaestus was born lame, an embarrassment to Hera, who cast him from Olympus in disgust. In other tales, it was Zeus who hurled him down after Hephaestus tried to intervene in a quarrel. Either way, the poor god fell for a day and night, landing in the sea or on Lemnos, where he was rescued and raised by sea nymphs. In exile, he honed his unmatched genius. From his volcanic forge, he created wonders: Zeus's thunderbolts, Achilles' intricate shield, bronze automatons that moved like living beings, and even Pandora, the first woman, molded in irresistible beauty. Hephaestus was the personification of ingenuity, patience, and hard work. To the Greeks, he was the patron of all artisans, from smiths to jewelers, a reminder that true power and beauty often arise not from innate glory, but from perseverance and craft. He was the fire that builds, not the fire that destroys. And finally, there was Hermes, messenger of the gods, deity of boundaries, commerce, invention, and, yes, thieves. His origin was a testament to early brilliance. Born in a cave, son of Zeus and the nymph Maia, he was walking and scheming before his first day had ended. In his first feat, still an infant, he escaped his cradle and stole Apollo's sacred cattle. To hide his tracks, he made the cattle walk backward and even crafted bark sandals to cover his own footprints. When Apollo confronted him, Hermes not only denied guilt, but invented the lyre from a turtle shell, offering it as a gift to soothe his brother. Conflict became harmony. A rivalry turned into alliance. Hermes was the bridge between realms, guide of souls to the underworld, psychopomp, protector of travelers and merchants. He was the word that connected, the idea that spread, the cleverness that found solutions where none seemed to exist. His winged sandals symbolized his speed and his ability to move between worlds, made him the god of transitions, messages, and adaptability. To mortals, Hermes was invoked. At every crossroad, every negotiation, every uncertain journey, these three gods, Athena, Hephaestus, and Hermes, represented the sacred triad of intelligence and skill that the Greeks deeply revered. Athena, the strategic mind and practical wisdom; Hephaestus, the creative hand and tireless innovation; Hermes, the voice of connection and brilliance in adaptation. They proved that divine power was not limited to violence or beauty, but also lived in thought, craft, and communication. Their myths taught mortals the value of reason over reckless passion, persistence over surrender, and dialogue over isolation. They were the pillars of civilization, the gods who inspired progress and social harmony, while the gods of Olympus ruled the skies, the seas, and the minds of men, and their passions stirred human fate. There were older and deeper forces that governed the very rhythm of mortal existence, the cycles of nature, life and death, abundance and famine, bloom and decay, all orchestrated by deities whose stories were intertwined with the earth itself and its eternal mysteries. At the heart of fertility and harvest stood Demeter, goddess of agriculture, nourisher of mankind. She was the embodiment of fertile soil, of golden wheat fields, and the promise of sustenance. To mortals, Demeter was the divine benefactor who taught them to sow and reap, to settle, to transform nomadic survival into rooted civilization. Her presence was felt in every sprouting seed, every ripening fruit. The life of every Greek household depended on her favor, and famine loomed whenever her sorrow shook the natural balance. And it was Demeter's sorrow that gave rise to the deepest of all cycles, a tale that explained the very dance of the seasons. Her beloved daughter, Persephone, also called Kore, the maiden, was a young goddess of flowers and springtime, an extension of her mother's vitality. She was often depicted crowned with blossoms, a symbol of innocence and her dominion over life above ground. One day, as Persephone gathered narcissus in a lush meadow, perhaps in Sicily, the earth suddenly opened beneath her. But this was no accident. Far above, on Olympus, Aphrodite, goddess of beauty and desire, watched the world with a flicker of frustration. Athena and Artemis, virgin goddesses, had rejected her dominion, refusing love and passion. Angered by this defiance, Aphrodite summoned her son, Eros, and instructed him to pierce the heart of the somber god Hades, so that even the underworld might burn with longing. Struck by an overwhelming passion, Hades emerged from the depths in his black chariot, seized Persephone, and carried her away to be his queen. This act, set in motion by Aphrodite, sealed Persephone's fate and revealed that the power of desire reached even into death itself. Demeter's despair was consuming. She wandered the world for days, inconsolable, searching for her daughter. Only Hermes, or in some tales, Hecate, goddess of crossroads, revealed the truth of the abduction. In her grief, Demeter abandoned her divine duties. The earth withered, seeds failed to sprout, trees bore no fruit. Famine threatened to extinguish humanity. Not even Zeus's pleas could calm her sorrow, for the mourning of a mother was a force greater than Olympus. Meanwhile, in the underworld, Persephone first resisted her fate, longing for the surface and her mother's embrace. But over time, she began to accept her new role as Queen of the Dead. Her transformation was symbolic, from innocent maiden to powerful sovereign of a realm beyond life. She came to embody the acceptance of death, a figure of balance between two worlds. Her journey was one of growth, maturity, and inevitable change. Zeus, alarmed by the suffering of humanity and the dying land, finally intervened. He ordered Hades to return Persephone, but Hades, ever cunning, had offered her a pomegranate, and Persephone had eaten a few seeds, 6 according to most stories. By consuming the fruit of the underworld, she had bound herself to it. The pomegranate, bursting with life, yet tied to blood and death, was a symbol of duality, fertility and fate. And so a compromise was born. Persephone would spend part of the year with her mother on earth, bringing spring and summer, and part of the year with Hades in the underworld, bringing autumn and winter. Thus, the cycle of seasons began. When Persephone rises, Demeter rejoices. The earth blooms. Grain ripens. Life flourishes. When she descends again, Demeter grieves. The fields go bare. The cold sets in. The earth sleeps in silence. This was more than a myth about weather. It was a deep allegory of life, death, and rebirth. A reminder that darkness is needed for light to return, and that death is not an end, but a pause in the eternal rhythm of being. The Eleusinian mysteries, sacred, secret rites, held in honor of Demeter and Persephone, promised initiates, a glimpse beyond the grave, a hope of renewal, a vision of the soul's return. Aphrodite's influence over Hades, kindling his desire for Persephone, was not an isolated event. In their complex connection, in another myth, the goddess of beauty and the king of the underworld became locked in a dispute over the fate of a mortal youth, Adonis. Aphrodite, enamored with the boy, hid him in a chest and entrusted him to Persephone for safekeeping. But upon seeing his beauty, Persephone too fell in love and refused to return him. The rivalry between the two goddesses grew so intense that Zeus had to intervene. He ruled that Adonis would spend 1/3 of the year with Aphrodite, 1/3 with Persephone in the underworld, and the final third wherever he pleased. This divine tug-of-war was a reminder that even in the silence of the underworld, desire and beauty could stir conflict and move the immortals themselves. Completing this cycle of life and death stood Dionysus, god of wine, madness, ecstasy, and rebirth. His origin was as paradoxical as his nature. Born of a mortal woman, Semele, and Zeus himself, Dionysus was snatched from his mother's burning womb and sewn into Zeus's thigh to be gestated a second time. This twice-born god became the very symbol of death and return, of destruction and regeneration. Dionysus was not a god of order. He was the force that shattered it. He was the god of liberation, of dissolving barriers, of merging with the divine through intoxication and ecstasy. His rites, often wild, nocturnal, and primal, allowed mortals to transcend their everyday identities, to experience a return to something more elemental, more vital, more alive. He was the sap that surged in the vine, the burst of joy in celebration, but also the madness that could unravel reason. Like Persephone, Dionysus was a figure who belonged both to harvest and decay, to joy and descent. He was revered in the Orphic mysteries for his own descent into the underworld and triumphant return, a symbol of springtime's eternal comeback. These gods, Demeter, Persephone, Hades, and Dionysus, governed the deepest rhythms of the human soul. They were the promise of food, the mystery of death, the hope of renewal, and the eruption of life in its most uncontrollable form. Their stories taught the Greeks that existence was a continuous cycle where every ending was a beginning and every withering a step toward rebirth. They embodied the resilience of nature and of the human spirit, which always finds a way to bloom again, even after the harshest winter. And so, travelers, We arrive at the end of our journey through the realms of Greek mythology, not as mere observers, but as participants in a tale that has unfolded for millennia. We began in the dust of mortal life, sensing the presence of the gods in every thunderclap and every harvest, and ascended through the ages, witnessing the cosmic dance of the primordials, the rise of the Olympians, and the passions that moved them. We saw the light of Apollo's reason and the instinctual shadow of Artemis, the strategic mind of Athena, and the creative hands of Hephaestus, the cunning of Hermes, and the eternal cycles governed by Demeter, Persephone, Hades, and Dionysus. But what do these myths truly teach us? They are not merely stories of gods and heroes with supernatural powers. They are, in truth, a multifaceted mirror of the human soul. The Greeks, in their wisdom, did not create perfect, distant gods. They gave them virtues and flaws, passions and fears, greatness and pettiness, reflections of themselves. Zeus, with his power and infidelities, embodied the strength and weakness of leadership. Hera, with her wounded pride and pursuit of justice, reflected the complexity of loyalty and revenge. Ares and Aphrodite reminded us of the dual nature of conflict and passion. Athena, Hephaestus, and Hermes celebrated intelligence, creation, and communication as pillars of a functioning society. And the gods of the cycle, Demeter, Persephone, Hades, and Dionysus, confronted us with life's deepest truths: the inevitability of death, the promise of rebirth, and the beauty of surrendering to the rhythm of existence. These myths were not simply entertainment. They were a sacred language, a way the Greeks explored the great questions of life. How do we face destiny? What is the price of pride? How do we find balance between reason and instinct, between order and chaos? The myths offered models for behavior, warnings against arrogance, and comfort in the face of mortality. In every temple, in every festival, in every play performed, the gods were present, not as distant beings, but as living forces, interacting with the world and with the human psyche. They were the personification of the cosmos, of nature, and of ourselves. Their legacy is immense. They shaped art, literature, philosophy, and even Western politics. Their archetypes still resonate in our stories, our dreams, our understanding of what it means to be human. The hero's journey, the tragedy of passion, the pursuit of wisdom, all have roots in the tales we've explored tonight. They remind us that despite our technology and progress, the fundamental questions of existence remain unchanged. The search for meaning, the struggle against adversity, the celebration of life, and the acceptance of death, all of it was contemplated by the Greeks with a depth that still speaks to us. And so, as we close this book of tales, we do not say goodbye, but rather, we offer an invitation. Because stories never truly end. They only wait to be told again, under a new light, for new minds. Greek mythology, with its richness and complexity, is an endless well-gaudy jizz of wisdom and inspiration. If this journey through the cosmos and the Greek soul has sparked your curiosity, if you feel there are still ancient truths to be uncovered, then do not let the veil of forgetfulness fall over these stories. Join our fellowship of seekers and dreamers. Subscribe to the channel. Your presence is the ambrosia that nourishes our passion to unravel the mysteries of the past. Sleep well, traveler, and may the gods, in all their divine and human complexity, continue to inspire your dreams.